I think we're entering this exciting part of the S-curve where Bitcoin monetizes rapidly. Most businesses will only ever use Bitcoin as a treasury asset. Right now, there's an opportunity for Bitcoin treasury companies who are focused on delivering Bitcoin yield. This is sustainable until Bitcoin fully monetizes. How long does this last? It's a land grab right now. 18 months from now, like there's going to be a meta planet in every meaningful capital market in the world. We don't talk enough about like buyer beware for an unproven Bitcoin treasury company. If you run the numbers, so like the equivalent PE ratio, then these are the most undervalued equities in the world, a well-run Bitcoin treasury company. And I do make that distinction.
Let me break this down for my fellow Bitcoiners. In just 8 weeks, I've seen a serious shift. More strength, more energy, and fast muscle gains. The reason? FITSCRIPT. They ran 124 biomarkers, blood, hormones, inflammation, and built a fully custom plan, nutrition, training, supplements. No guesswork, no templates. This is functional medicine meets precision fitness for high-performing men who want sovereignty over their health. If you care about optimization the way you care about your money, test, don't guess. Don't trust, verify. Hit the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to check out FITSCRIPT and see what's possible. You opted out of the broken financial system by adopting Bitcoin and taking self-custody of your money. But protecting your wealth is only part of the equation. Now it's time to protect your freedom. My family is stacking sats and stacking flags. A second passport is our hedge against government overreach and uncertainty. If you're a Bitcoiner looking for your exit strategy, our friends at Citizen X will help you secure second citizenship through investment or descent. Book your free call today by hitting the link in the show notes or simply scanning the QR code on the screen. How long do you think that this model remains compelling to people, right? Like how many treasury companies can exist and still have the ability to actually have people lend them money to accumulate Bitcoin when a company becomes just straight treasury? The only thing you do is obtain debt to accumulate Bitcoin. And that works as long as dollars will be lent for you to buy the Bitcoin. At some point, I have to imagine that this happens at such a pace that who's going to take the dollars at that point? And if that happens, the people that did it first are going to be great. But like, if you're a company, like you have to have, do you not have to have like an underlying business that accumulates money through your actual business as well?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I think first and foremost, like most businesses will only ever use Bitcoin as a treasury asset. I think right now there's an opportunity for Bitcoin treasury companies who are focused on delivering Bitcoin yield, and that's kind of, in my view, the definition of a Bitcoin treasury company. There's an opportunity for them to establish themselves in every capital market in the world. In the service, the function that they provide, the way that they add value to the world. If you can get behind this, right? You may disagree, but they add value by helping to facilitate the flow of capital from the disequilibrium state that we're in of Bitcoin being a tiny little bucket and bonds and equities being giant. In the equity market, you're paying 20, 30, 40 PE ratios. And in fixed income, you're losing money every year by holding bonds if you account for the true inflation rate. And Bitcoin treasury companies are helping to facilitate the flow of capital to restore equilibrium at a faster rate. And so in my view, there's an opportunity, this is sustainable until Bitcoin fully monetizes, right? Like until it climbs the S-curve to its end state of what it will be in the global asset landscape. And I think that's somewhere between 20, my conservative estimate is 20% of global asset value. Saylor has used that same framework of mine and said 50%. So I think it's probably somewhere in between there. And right now we're 0.2% of global asset value. So, Bitcoin is monetizing. We're in this, I think Jeff nailed it. That's a really cool framework, actually, by the way, Jeff, of the sort of decades of, and how they line up with the path dependence of monetary properties, of collectibles into store of value, and then medium of exchange, and then unit of account. I love that. That's probably roughly right. I like it. And yeah, we're in that. I think we're entering this exciting part of the S curve where Bitcoin monetizes rapidly. And that means adds value as a store of value asset that everybody starts to recognize as, digital capital for the digital age. And Bitcoin treasury companies that are in the business of fiat arbitrage. So it's not actually like taking on leverage or taking on debt specifically, but it's about finding ways to deliver Bitcoin yield, meaning growing Bitcoin per share through using capital market tools. And for the Smarter Web company I'm a part of in the UK, we hope to be and think we're on the right path to be that leader in the UK, and hope to grow our balance sheet to a place where we can become the MicroStrategy of the UK, and offer these preferred equity instruments and tap into the fixed income market and hoover up capital there to buy Bitcoin and help facilitate the flow of capital to Bitcoin. And yeah, so I think that's what's going on. I think that's the economic reality. I think it's sustainable so long as Bitcoin is monetizing. And then what are these businesses ultimately? These, the core competency of a well-run Bitcoin treasury company is to find ways to increase Bitcoin per share over time. And so that kind of ends up in like a Bitcoin bank. At the end of that S curve, when it has plateaued, you find ways to lend Bitcoin in ways where you receive a greater return, and then you're a Bitcoin bank. And that's where strategies, like you can see where strategies going there. And I think that that story will play out in every capital market in the world, because there has to be like a homegrown hero, a champion in that capital market that lives within the regulatory framework of that capital market and is well positioned to tap into institutional capital there and the fixed income market there. So yeah, and then again, like most companies will not do this, and there's not room for a ton of companies focusing on Bitcoin yield. I think it's winner take most in every capital market in the world. Strategy is it in the US. And then there's going to be some other companies that try and fail. There's going to be some companies that try and achieve a degree of success, I think. Any company that's trying to add Bitcoin to its balance sheet for the benefit of its shareholders at this point in time is doing, in my opinion, the best thing they can possibly be doing for shareholders. Like you're accumulating the asset that that we all think is the best asset in the world. Every company should be doing that too. If you're not doing that, you're doing a disservice to your shareholders. So, but yeah, then ultimately, I think there's kind of like a winner take most in every capital market. That'll be the go-to for how you take risk with how you grow your Bitcoin ownership. And there's a place for that, in my view, in every portfolio. Maybe it's 0%, maybe it's 20%, or even 50%. It shouldn't be 100%. People should have cold storage Bitcoin, in my view. But there's and Saylor got me on this one. This comes from him, but there's a place for risk capital on a Bitcoin standard, and Bitcoin treasury companies are the best way, in my view, to get that exposure.
I see Danny and Jeff chomping at the bit here. I'm sure you guys have questions. So whoever wants to go first, and questions, comments on what Jesse's been saying here.
Well, Jeff will be smarter than me, so I'll go first. But there's a few. I've got a ton of questions and not many answers. So let me throw some stuff at you. One of the things is like, how long does this business model of sort of selling common stock to buy Bitcoin remain interesting? And because I think Saylor really changed the game with the preferreds. And when I talk about treasury companies, I think what strategy are doing is completely separate to what most of these other companies are doing. Like they are innovating at this point. They're by far the biggest. And I'm not bullish in the sense that I don't own any strategy, but I think they're around for a long time. But what I'm concerned about is like the business model of these other companies. I don't know how sustainable that is. I don't know if the game is already over. of just selling common stock to buy Bitcoin. And then the other thing that I'm skeptical on is the idea of there needing to be one of these in every jurisdiction. Because I understand that places like Japan and China, like they'll have capital controls, money can't move out the country very easily. But I'm from the UK, live in Australia, and if I want exposure to any of these things, I can just go and buy Strategy. And so I don't necessarily understand the dynamic of these capital markets needing their own version of Strategy. Like, why would someone go out and buy a kind of shitty version of Strategy just because it has an Australian flag on it? I guess would be like, that's some of my questions. I've got plenty more.
So I'll answer that last one first, and then you'll have to remind me of the first one by the time I get through that. So there are some structural reasons why lots of capital in any particular capital market can't access foreign stocks. A lot of institutional capital has mandates that they have to be invested in domestic equities, and that's true in the fixed income market as well. And so that also as you're familiar with in the UK, to date the FCA has not allowed retirement account capital to have access to Bitcoin, and so your options are you can jump through some hoops to get probably not that hard, but to get access to Strategy, or I guess to Metaplanet. But if it's a UK listed company, it's slightly easier to get access to that with your retirement account capital. So those are some reasons. I think being embedded in the regulatory framework of a jurisdiction makes it easier to have conversations with institutional allocators and say, like, we're regulated by the FCA, as are you. You have mandates to invest only in UK companies. This is a good fit, right? And so there's some reasons there why there's a position for in every capital market in the world. And take Saylor's words here. He's talked about how they looked into trying to set up shop in Japan, and it with some, I guess, subsidiary, and it proved to, I guess, evidently was not worth doing. So Metaplanet had the opportunity to get to scale before Strategy was ever able to enter, and Saylor welcomes that too, because it's a healthier ecosystem if Strategy isn't like the one and only Bitcoin treasury company. And then to your point about like just issuing equity, my mental model of how it works for any Bitcoin treasury company is you have to go through life cycle stages, right? Like you have to get to scale. You have to get to a scale where you can have an ATM. So that's like kind of the first step. The first step is to do private placement, equity raises, and grow an investor base, and so that your stock starts to have more trading volume, more liquidity, and then you can get to a scale where you can start an ATM, which is what Metaplanet has relied on for the last year to grow, and it's been their main fuel source, and that's issuing equity into the market every day or every week. And that's, again, a different form of equity issuance, but that's what it takes to grow your balance sheet to a point where you have the creditworthiness that makes it possible to launch preferred equities, and which are more targeted on the fixed income market. So you kind of have to transition your fuel source from speculators and then people who are seeking value in equities. Like that's, I think, one of the things that's misunderstood about Bitcoin treasury companies is, you can buy a 20, 30, 40 PE ratio company, but, and the implication there is like, you're paying today for, you're paying a price of 30 years worth of earnings for that stock. But Bitcoin treasury companies deliver value, in my view, in a different way, not through the income statement, but through expanding the balance sheet, through increasing Bitcoin per share on the balance sheet. And when you run the numbers on that, and we put out a report about this over the summer with a new metric called PBID. If you run the numbers on how quickly a Bitcoin treasury company has been able to deliver Bitcoin yield, and then compare that against their MNAV, the premium that they trade at versus the Bitcoin on their balance sheet, Strategy is delivering value. So like the equivalent PE ratio for them is like 1.5. And for Metaplanet right now, it's like a quarter of a year. And for SmarterWeb, it's a quarter of a year. And so if you expect a continuation of that kind of performance, in the same way that you expect a continuation of earnings for a traditional equity, then these are the most undervalued equities in the world, a well-run Bitcoin treasury company. And I do make that distinction of like, you need to have a track record of delivering Bitcoin per share increases. And there's a lot of pretenders who don't own any Bitcoin who wanted the price pop and are in it for the wrong reasons. And all those things are true. But, among the well-run Bitcoin treasury companies, they're delivering shareholder value through this different approach. But like at the end of the day, like that's what a company wants to do is to have their retained earnings go up through the operations year over year over year. And Bitcoin treasury companies are instead using fiat arbitrage, using capital market tools to directly inject Bitcoin into their balance sheet at an incredible rate because the opportunity is so big right now, because fiat buckets are so big and Bitcoin still so tiny, that these things are delivering real value and at an incredible speed. And anyway, so that's all to say that for the first couple life cycle stages, the fuel source needs to be issuing equity and delivering Bitcoin per share increases through those efforts, so that you can grow to a stage where you can focus on tapping into the fixed income market as your primary fuel source.
I want to allow Jeff to tap in as well, whether it's continuation of what's being said here, or if you have your own line of questioning that you had as well. I know, Danny, you had others, but I want to give Jeff a crack at it too.
Yeah, holy smokes, I got lots of things I'd love to talk to Jesse about. And but so anyways, first of all, you hit on this, Jesse. This is the trade of the decade, right? I've been saying this for a while too, and I know people talk about this, the speculative attack, or I like to say speculative arbitrage. If you can if you can sell or short or borrow something that's depreciating and buy something that's appreciating, mathematically it's just going to work out. And the bigger that yawning gap, as you see with the dollar and with Bitcoin, the more profitable that's going to be over time. So it's a great strategy in general. I too am skeptical that the additional US-based Bitcoin treasury companies will have the same kind of impact or returns and results that MicroStrategy or Strategy has had. And a lot of that remains to be seen. Danny talked about or Ben, one of you guys or both of you guys were saying like, how long will companies be able to sell common stock, sell shares to buy Bitcoin? And I would say, as a fund manager, this is very common in Wall Street. It's a very traditional thing to do for any company, even in the fiat land. If your shares are overpriced, they'll issue a bunch of shares at that higher price. They'll take that cash, deposit the inflow and use it for whatever. They'll put it on their balance sheet. They'll buy treasuries, whatever. And so obviously for any company, I think this will just be a standard tool once the novelty of this wears off going forward, because every company over the next 10 to 15 years will become a Bitcoin treasury company, meaning it's clearly the best asset. It's clearly the best way for companies to accrue purchasing power over time, probably at a rate higher than an ROI higher than their other investments they would make as a company. There's not many business lines that can keep up with a CAGR of 30 to 50%. So I think it will be kind of standard for most companies just to be like, hey, we're overpriced right now for whatever reason. We're the meme stock of the day. Let's issue some more shares. Let's take that cash injection. Let's buy some Bitcoin with it and put it on our balance sheet. That's actually a very intelligent move to make. And I think more companies are going to be doing that. I agree with you, Ben, that I think we're in this period. Oh, sorry, Jesse, you got something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, sort of to Danny's point and to your point here of like, how long does this last? I do think that my mental model is that like this is an industry that's emerging right now, and that 18 months from now, like there's going to be a meta planet in every meaningful capital market in the world. And so, it's a land grab right now. It's a rush to establish that leadership position, to be the meta planet in your capital market. And then, from there, these entities grow into sort of strategy-like role in their capital markets. But basically, I don't think this is forever. I think this is a very much, it's happening right now that MetaPlanet has proved that it's possible. And 2 years from now, it'll be in hindsight.
I see like a pretty bearish case for any of the smaller treasury companies, in the sense that like you're always fighting the gravity to like a 1x MNAV and below. And do you think there's like a scenario here where if these smaller treasury companies are trading below 1x MNAV, that they're kind of stuck in a doom loop, in the sense that the only way out of that is then selling Bitcoin, trying to get the share price back above 1x MNAV, but then what does that actually do to the business model? And just for like context, if I go fully left curve, people buying Bitcoin's cool. I like it. And this is always going to happen. But these are just the questions I have around the whole treasury company market.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we don't talk enough about like buyer beware for an unproven Bitcoin treasury company. If you end up invested in a company whose flywheel stops or never gets started, they should trade under a 1x MNAV, because they have costs to operate. And if they're not a profitable business, or if they added infrastructure to make themselves a Bitcoin treasury company, and then they're not able to do that, that's drag. The operating costs of the business are drag. They're stuck. You should end up under 1x MNAV, and there's going to be a lot of stories like that. So like as a Bitcoin treasury company, you have to continue to deliver. Otherwise, you run the risk of the flywheel stopping, and you end up in that scenario where you're dead in the water, and it gets ugly. And so I think that's going to happen for most Bitcoin treasury companies. Like, as I've said, in the UK, like most Bitcoin treasury companies never bought Bitcoin. They just said they were going to, and they intended to, and they hoped for the price pop and for things to happen so that they could. And then the market changed on them, and they never got the critical mass they needed in terms of investors lined up or whatever, right? And now they're kind of dead in the water, I would say, because if you don't get off the ground, you're never going to get off the ground, because you don't deserve to get off the ground, right? You have to execute in order to inspire confidence in your investors that you're going to continue executing.
Hey, you. Yes, you watching the Bitcoin price movements and the latest exciting news. It's awesome to stay informed, but the real power of Bitcoin comes from taking control. Don't just watch, take action. Head over to btcsessions.ca/learn for free step-by-step tutorials that guide you through every major skill you need to know, plus full video playlists for deeper dives on any topic you like. And if you're ready for the ultimate fast track, scroll to the bottom and check out bitcoinmentor.io for premium one-on-one experience with my team of Bitcoin experts to ensure you get it right the first time. Don't wait. Secure your Bitcoin future today. Hit the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen.